it's irrelevant what happens within the dream. That's the point. And we're talking about liberation. So with respect to liberation, it doesn't matter what goes on within the dream. It's completely irrelevant. You know, you could be dreaming of anything. You could be dreaming of something good, dreaming something bad, but ultimately it doesn't matter what you dream. When you wake up, you realize it's all an imaginary thing.
Yeah.
And that's like this life.
You know, it's funny. I'm sorry.
No, but it's a very nihilistic teaching, this teaching in some ways. But the teachings are also not necessarily 100% true, but they lead to liberation.
Yes. I have something that you posted in the last couple of weeks that I was gonna read. I think it's beautiful, or it's for me, and it's about dreams. You know, it's funny that he was talking about dreaming tonight. But I mentioned to my wife the other day, I used to have these flying dreams when I first started meditating, and it's been a couple of years since I had a flying dream. And I mentioned to her the other day, I said, you know, I haven't had a flying dream in a long time. The next night, I had this flying dream. I'm flying over the Florida Keys. It was just unbelievable, you know, and so realistic. And then, of course, I woke up. I wasn't scared at all either. It was just, you know, hey, I'm flying. Everything's cool. I woke up. Yeah. Anyway, this is, you posted this. I'm not sure when. It's from Shankara. I looked him up. He's 8th century Hindu. Number 170. In dreams, when there is no actual contact with the external world, the mind alone creates the whole universe, consisting of the experiencer, etc. Similarly, in the waking state also, there is no difference. Therefore, all this phenomenal universe is a projection of the mind. So the universe is happening in the, that's really amazing. And I'm beginning to see that.
Yes. Have faith in it. Have faith. You're going to realize that that's the only possible way suffering can end as well. You know that all the great traditions, especially the Hindu tradition, the Vedanta tradition, the yoga traditions, and the Buddhist traditions, they all say that liberation is characterized by the end of suffering. Yeah, there might be other things they characterize liberation with as well, but what's in common? They say it's the end of suffering. Buddha was very, very clear about that. In the Vedanta text, it says all fear, all suffering goes. Now, if this wasn't an illusion, if this world was all real, then you're going to suffer, you know? Because what are you going to do when, you know, your best friend or your loved one becomes unwell? You're going to suffer. What are you going to do when you're near death? You're going to suffer. What are you going to do when you can't pay the bills or you're losing your job? You're going to suffer. You know, what are you going to do when all these happen at once? You're going to suffer. What are you going to do if none of these are happening? So everything's fine. You've got your health, you've got your wealth, you've got your friends and family. What are you going to do when you've got them all? But then there's a possibility. There's a possibility that something might happen in one of these areas. You suffer. Even when everything's good.
Yeah.
You know?
Just the thought of
worrying. Worry, oh my gosh, I've got it all. I need to keep it like this. You know, what if my wife leaves me? What if you know, what if something happens to my child? What if something happens to my health? What if something happens to my job? What if something happens to my money? What if something happens to my possessions? So even when you've got it all, there's suffering. The only way the suffering can truly, completely end is if this ultimately is not real. It's the only way. You'll realize. Otherwise, you're fucked. Basically. You're effed. Sorry.
Well, it's becoming more and more and more of a dream, thanks to you and many of the teachers and many of the. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I've read so many books. I know not as many as you, but I'm up there. Anyway, you know,
I win. Yeah, that's what you're saying. No,
you win, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, when it comes to, like, you know, how many books have you read competition?
Yeah, especially when you showed me the hardcover copy of Steve Hagen's first book.
Oh yeah. I got that when I was a kid. Yeah, and it came out in hardback. It was an influential book to me.
Yeah.
What's it called? It's called.
Oh gee, I'll think of it in a
It was,
minute. I've got all his books. I forget what that first
Buddhism,
one.
Plain and Simple.
Yes. Thank you. Buddhism, Plain and Simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I had an older version of the book than Ernie, so I won that one too. So it's irrelevant, you know. All the Ramana is a dream. Ramana's nothing, you know. And you know how much I love and care for Ramana and have appreciation of him. He's nothing. It's just the nothing. So in the dream where you're Luke Skywalker, you might meet a great spiritual teacher called Ramana or called Yoda or whatever. And then Luke Skywalker you might feel you're learning loads. Yoda might say, look, come and meditate with me and sit by my side and listen to my teachings. And you go and meditate with Yoda or Ramana, and you're doing so well, you know, and it feels amazing. And you've got all these spiritual experiences. It's all rubbish, you see? You wake up, you realize, oh my gosh, I thought I was Luke Skywalker, and there is no Luke Skywalker. 2, I thought I was chatting to Yoda or Ramana, and there is no Ramana. And 3, I thought I was really spiritual, but that was just a dream. And I thought I was getting there. It's all an egoic dream for Luke Skywalker, you see. So similarly with us, we might feel like, oh yes, you know, on Monday, I had this amazing experience. I was meditating. I was listening to, you know, Tom Dass on the YouTube channel, and you know, had heard these voices. It was amazing, and you know, it's illusion. This is all the me illusion. You see, this is what happens when you believe you're a body mind. You're not the body mind.
Thanks, Tom. I got one more quick question for you.
Yeah.
We started a men's group, a spirituality men's group, and you know, and one of the things is we're not supposed to be teaching. We're just supposed to come up with spiritual stuff, and it's been pretty good. But anyway, and so next week we all have to come in with our definition of spirituality. You know what? Because we're all looking at it differently.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, for me, spirituality is.
Hey, are you trying to ask me to help you with your homework, Ernie?
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
Well, I'll tell you what my definition is to me, spirituality is the non-material aspect of things, the universe or whatever. I don't know. What would you?
Well, I like your second answer. The I don't know bit.
Okay.
I'll give you a definition of spirituality, and it's, if you ask me at different times, I'll give you a different definition.
Yeah.
So 1, everything for me is spiritual. Okay. So it is about the non-physical aspect of the universe. That's everything. Or we can say our entire experience is non-physical, because all we experience is our consciousness. Like in a dream, all your experience, you might think you're experiencing reality, but actually in the dream, like you might at the time you think you're really flying over the Florida Keys, but it's all you were actually aware of was your own consciousness, your own imagination. So everything you were aware of, it felt physical at the time, but actually nothing ever feels physical. Nothing ever feels real. All there is consciousness and your experience of your own projection. But the mind then comes along and interprets it as, that's real. The Florida Keys, I can see, that's real. The wind going through my hair as I'm flying over the Florida Keys, the mind says that's real. My body with superhuman flying powers, the mind says that's real, you see. But nothing ever says I'm real. It's only the mind that wrongly interprets everything. So that's called ignorance. So we remove the ignorance, using the teaching everything is a dream.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you, Tom.
That's one answer. I'm going to give you one more answer for your homework, Ernie. Which is that basically, spirituality is just about the ending of suffering. That's a practical definition. It's a dualistic definition, actually. But it's a
Wow.
practical definition. That which ends suffering makes you feel whole, complete.
I'd be afraid to say that one. I just,
Well, if you're afraid to say it, you can.
I don't think they would even come close to understanding it. I don't know.
Well, if you're afraid to say that, you could find the quote from the Buddha, and the Buddha says, people ask the Buddha, what is spirituality? What is religion? And he says, all I teach is about suffering and how to end it. So you can say, I came across this quote by the Buddha, if you wanted to, and say, the Buddha said all he teaches is about suffering. The suffering, he said the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. You've heard of the Four Noble Truths, I know, because you've been involved in Buddhism for a long time. The first noble truth of Buddhism was there is suffering. The second noble truth was suffering has a cause. Third noble truth is suffering has a cause. Has an end. And the end is, if we remove the cause of suffering, then suffering ends. Yeah, so there's suffering, number one. Suffering has a cause, number two. Suffering has an end, number three. And the teaching should end there, really. But then he goes, the fourth noble truth is, okay, there's a methodology, the noble path, which can end suffering. And that's the, the eightfold.
Eightfold.
Yeah, the Ashtanga path. Ashtanga means eightfold. Eight-limbed. Ashtanga means eight-limbed path, eightfold path. So that was the Buddha's entire teaching. His entire spirituality was based on the notion there's suffering, and there's a cause of suffering, and that cause can be uprooted and it can end. And you'll find that in all the great traditions. In the Christian Bible, in one of the letters, or one of John's letters, I think it's the second epistle of John, he says, in love, he said, God is love. Okay? And he says, in love, there is no fear. No fear. In love, there is no fear. I think it says something like, perfect love casteth out all fear. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
No fear. Perfect love. There's no room for fear. If this is a dream, why are you afraid? In the Ashtavakra Gita, when it's a conversation between King Janaka, who was the seeker, and Ashtavakra, who was the saint, the sage. And King Janaka seeks advice from sage Ashtavakra. Right at the beginning of the Ashtavakra Gita, it's very unusual. Usually these dialogues between the guru and the seeker, the master and the pupil, the master and the student, it takes you gradually through a process. And at the end of the text, the seeker becomes enlightened and says, thank you, teacher. Thank you, dear teacher, for enlightening me. In the Ashtavakra Gita, right at the beginning, Janaka's teachings result in King Janaka's enlightenment, right in chapter 1. And the remaining chapters, I think they're 20 chapters or something, I think. Anyway, the remaining chapters of the Ashtavakra Gita, they just, Ashtavakra just is testing him the whole way through, just making sure. And in one of the chapters, he says, if you're enlightened, why do you care for the body? If you're enlightened, why do you care for pleasures of the senses? If you're enlightened, why do you care about wealth and gain? If you're enlightened, why are you afraid? And the implication is that none of these should be there. There's perfect wholeness. There's no room for these things. There's no room for egotism. There's just not there. So don't be afraid. If that's what you think, you give your answer, Annie, to them, obviously. At our next meeting, come back and tell us what you said. Tell us how it went, by all means, if you want to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, my friend.